Hello, ninth graders. Last week we learned about the order of the Latin liturgy. Today in Chapter 8, we're going to talk about the Church of the Middle Ages. The history of the Church from the 8th to 15th centuries is described in this lesson. The Catholic Church in Europe had a heavy influence during the Middle Ages. In this chapter, we will discuss the Church and nation, the Church and feudalism, the Dark Ages and Renovation, disciplinary actions or Inquisition, the Holy Wars, and finally, the popes in Avignon. The Church got all favors during the reign of Emperor Constantine, when the Church became independent through the Edict of Milan in 313 AD. During the Middle Ages, the Church acquired great economic power. By the year 1050, it was the largest landholder in Europe. Some land was gifted to the Church by monarchs and wealthy lords, while other land was taken by force. Thus, many places of Italy came under the dominion of the Pope, which marked the beginning of the Papal State. The medieval Church added to its wealth by collecting a tithe, or tax. Each member was expected to give 1/10 of his money, produce, or labor to help support the Church. In 568 AD, German natives known as Lombards attacked Italy, which was in the Byzantine Empire at the time. The emperor was not able to resist the attack of the Lombards, so he went to the Pope. The Pope gave leadership to Italy and resisted the attacks of the Lombards. Thus, influence of the Pope increased in Italy. The emperors of Constantinople were ruling Italy. Leo III, who was the emperor of Constantinople from 717 to 790 AD, began to intrude into religious affairs. He destroyed the images of Christ and the saints under the pretext of idolatry and prohibited venerating them. But the Pope did not approve of the decision of the emperor. Council Nicaea II, held in 787, taught that the veneration of the images of the saints is not wrong. This caused cleavage between Italy and Constantinople. Thus, the ecclesiastical and national dominion of the Pope was established. The threat of the Lombards was on the increase. The Pope sought the help of Pepin, the King of France. Popes Zechariah, from 741 to 752, and Stephen, from 752 to 757, both accepted Pepin. Thus, the Pope cut away relationship with the Byzantine Empire and Constantinople. Pepin defeated the Lombards and gave to the Pope domination over many cities and territories. Besides, he prepared a legal document granting the Pope full authority over these territories and promising every kind of help to the Pope in future. This is known as Pepin's donation. Later on, the Pope received authority over more places. Thus, an independent kingdom called the Papal State came into existence in the name of the Pope. Thus, the Pope became the spiritual and national ruler at the same time. The relationship between the Church and the king became strengthened during the reign of Charlemagne, the son of Pepin. The king took to himself the maintenance of the Church and nation. He did good things to make the rule of the Church easy. He prohibited the non-Christian traditions and codified laws in order to enhance uniformity for Christianity all over. Pope Leo III, from 795 to 816, fully accepted the dominion of Charlemagne. Pope Leo crowned Charlemagne as the emperor of the Roman Empire. That was the reconstruction of the lost Roman Empire. Through this, the spiritual authority of the Pope and the temporal authority of the Emperor were established all over Europe. During this period, an understanding was formed that the Pope should accept the Roman Emperor and should crown the Roman Emperor, and the Emperor in return should be the protector of the Church. The Papal State took its origin with the good intention of protecting the Church community from enemies and avoiding Church's intervention in national affairs. The Papal State brought to the Pope temporal power. Since the Church enjoyed spiritual and temporal authorities, the attention of the Church rulers began to turn more towards temporal matters than to the spiritual affairs. People began to contest for the post of papacy. By getting political authority, bishops and priests turned towards pompous life. They undertook royal positions and began to wear majestic dress. Emperor Charlemagne died in 814 AD. The 200 years that followed are considered to be the dark age of the Church. During this period, the feudal system started. Roman Empire was divided into small states. The rule was transferred to the feudal landlords. Those who possessed their own land became independent rulers over their own land. When the feudal system flourished, it affected the Church too, to a great extent. The Church and the properties of the Church came under the rule of the landlords. The Church and the institutions of the Church became means of wealth for the lords. There was tug of war for the post of the Pope. 9 popes were killed in assaults during the period between 867 and 1048. Thus, that was a period filled with anarchy. Kings and lords wielded their influence in the election of popes. The Church rulers were forced to work according to the pleasure of the lords. The lords and kings appropriated the income of the Church. The spiritual nature of the Church was lost to a certain extent during this period. The Christian spirit was dimmed in this period. The life of the Church leaders was scandalous. All these show the human side of the Church. It is because the Church has a divine grace that she remains steady. The Church, which declined, grew up again into hope and goodness. It was the religious institutions that came forward to arrest the decadence of the Church. A religious congregation started at Cluny in France in the year 910 AD, and it was known as the Clunian movement. In the course of time, Cluny and ashram became the center of the Renovation movement. The ascetics of Cluny cared very much to help the Church authorities. They showed great interest in establishing ashrams with very strict rules. They spent their life in prayer and meditation, keeping away from other affairs. Their thoughts of renovation were an inspiration for other religious communities and churches. In continuation of the renovation of ashrams, efforts were carried out under the leadership of the popes too. It was Pope Leo IX, who reigned from 1049 to 1054, who marked the beginning of this enterprise. After him, many popes gave leadership to this. The following are those who dedicated themselves to set free the Church spiritually during this period: Saint Francis of Assisi, Saint Bernard, Saint Clare, and Saint Dominic Goodman. The religious ashrams they started strengthened the Church very much. The Church during the Middle Ages passed through many crises. There were many persons who strengthened the Church during this period. The soldiers of the Holy Wars served the Church, giving up even their very lives. Let's also strengthen the Church when she passes through crises in this modern age through our sacrificing services. Now let's memorize your Bible verse for today. Therefore, be imitators of God, as beloved children and live in love as Christ loved us and gave himself up for us a fragrant offering and sacrifice to God. Ephesians chapter 5, verse 1 and 2. Now let's talk about your questions from this lesson. How was the beginning of the papal state? What does the donation of Pepin mean? How was the renovation of the church in the Middle Ages? Pope Francis said, "I think of Hagia Sophia and I am very sad." For your activity this week, how do you evaluate the incidents of Hagia Sophia in the light of Crusades? Okay, ninth graders, this concludes the first part of Lesson 8 for this week. Next week, we'll go into Part 2, which will be the disciplinary actions or Inquisition, the Holy Wars, and the popes in Avignon. Goodbye for now and have a blessed week. Bye.